Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you. Today we're going to make French Vidalia onion soup. And of course, you can use any kind of onion you like, but there's nothing quite like Vidalia's. And so that's what I'm going to use. And hey, you know, if you like our videos, we would love it if you would give us a thumbs up and subscribe and share it with your friends. So here are my Vidalia onions. Let me say that slowly. Vidalia. We are having soup for an entree tonight, so I'm going to make double portions. Usually it's 1 onion per person. At least 1. You can do more if you want. So I'm going to show you how to cut onions for a French style soup. And that is really, many people say what French means in French onion soup. It's how you cut the onion, not where it's from. Others would argue with that. But anyway, to French cut an onion, you cut it with the grain. And I'm at a bad angle here, so please don't use my technique here. It's the camera. I can't quite reach it right. But you're cutting thin slices with the grain, and you want to get them as thin as you can. And many people cut it across thinly, and in my opinion it really doesn't make any difference in the final product because you're going to cook them to mush anyway. But trying to show you, this is the way to French cut onions. I'm going to do another one and try to get a little bit better angle to show you how I'm doing it. This is a little bit better technique, I guess. I rock my knife. I'm going to curl my fingers when I get closer. And you just go with the grain, the little striations that you see on there. And then when you get it down close to the end, you flip it over and chop up that final bit. There you go. That was a little bit better. I don't want you to cut your fingers off. And then separate them out as much as you can. And you see we've got nice thin strips there. That's a French cut onion. So I've got my 5-quart enameled cast iron Dutch oven here, and I'm putting in a stick of butter. Now, most recipes will call for half butter, half oil. I just like to use butter, but you should just know that most recipes call for less butter, more oil. I've got this melting on medium heat, and I'm going to drop the onions in and separate them as much as you can as you're dropping them in. You know, I didn't get it all separated when I was cutting, but you want these in strips because cooking the onions is pretty important. It's a big part of this. And stir as you go because you're going to coat everything with the butter. And let me talk a little bit about that cooking technique. Onions are naturally sweet. Almost all onions are naturally sweet. And your goal in this cooking is to coax the sweetness out. And if you do this right, you can make onions almost sugar sweet. So that's why we're making sure it's all separated. Everything is coated in the butter. And we want to do this until we get that sweetness out. We're going to go very, very slowly. And with Vidalia's, there's absolutely no reason that this won't work perfectly. I'm going to put a little salt, actually a good bit of salt. That's a lot of onions. About a teaspoon and a half. That'll help coax the sweetness out, and it'll help them sweat down more quickly. And here's a little fact many people don't know. If you can't get something sweet enough when you're cooking it or when you're eating it, add a pinch of salt. Salt tones down the bitterness and lets the sugar come through. So we're coating this well with the butter because we don't want anything to stick. And I've got this on a medium-high heat, and I'm going to cook it until the onions let go of their moisture and they start to turn translucent. That takes just a couple minutes. See, we've got the moisture letting go, and we've got a nice sizzle going there. And the onions are translucent, so I'm going to put the lid on this pan, and I'm going to turn the heat down pretty low, like 2 out of 9, and set my timer for about 20 minutes. And I'll check in and show you how it's going. This is after about 7 minutes, and if you'll see, they're sizzling nicely, low heat. The onions are getting soft, and they smell so good. So I'll put the lid back on and prepare the bread. Well, I thought I had some French bread, but I didn't, and so I'm going to use this Texas toast. Stale French bread is the very best thing, and this is neither French bread nor stale, so we're going to adapt. And I'm going to cut the crust off of this. If I were using French bread, I wouldn't. Then I'll put it over in my roaster oven on about 250, and you can use your oven just to dry it out a bit. It's still too soft. Not toasting now, just drying. Back to the onions. We're going to taste now for sweetness. You should never, ever, ever have to add sugar to this. It's very sweet. I'm going to uncover it, let it simmer now for about 10 minutes, and let it start getting that beautiful color. While that's simmering, I'm going to butter this dried bread. By the way, Julia Child calls these croûtes. And I guess that's what they are if Julia says it. So just going to butter them. Should have melted my butter. And I've split a garlic clove. I'm going to soften it a little bit with the edge of my knife. And then I'm just going to rub this garlic clove over the bread just to get a little bit of the garlic flavor, but not overpower it. And I suppose you could use just a tiny little bit of garlic powder, not salt, powder. But I've got plenty of garlic, and this is a nice flavor. Then I'll put these under the broiler and get a nice little toasty brown on them. And yes, I'm really wishing I had some French bread, but these will be fine. And back to our onions, and I want you to look at that wonderful color and the texture. If you see, these are almost mush at this point. They've been slowly cooked. We've got all that sweet, sugary flavor in there, and a deep richness too. So I'm going to pour in just a little bit of broth. Actually, this is stock, and I'm going to deglaze with this, just to get all of the goodness that's down on the bottom on the pan loose. And then we will pour the rest of our broth in, our stock, and we're going to let this simmer a while. Now, at this point, if you want, you can add some thyme, some fresh thyme or some powdered thyme. Some folks add a little rosemary. Thyme is more traditional. I'm purposely not adding herbs to this just because Fred asked me not to. So, but thyme is traditional, and you may want to add it at this point. So I'm going to let this simmer now for about 20 minutes. Let all the flavors meld together. See, we want to get a pretty good simmer. Don't want to scorch it, and you're going to stir it a couple of times. And I should mention too, if you want to keep this a vegetarian soup, it's just perfectly fine to use oil instead of the butter, and to use vegetable stock, vegetable broth instead of the beef. Okay, it's been about 15-20 minutes. We're going to taste it now for salt. And this is the time for salt and pepper. But this is fine. I don't need a bit more. And we're all ready to start our assembly. And you know, the soup could be done right now if you wanted it to be. My mother doesn't like this last step, and so if she's eating soup with us, I don't put anything else in hers. But for it to be French onion soup the way we all think of French onion soup, there's a certain way to put it together. These are big bowls. We're having this as an entree, and I'm separating the soup into equal portions. And I've got these on a cookie sheet, and I actually should have something under them, but I didn't have anything. So I'll just be really careful. So drop your little croûtes on, little pieces of toast, and they'll float. That's one reason we dried the bread. And your choice of cheese here is pretty personal. Mozzarella, I think, is more traditional. I'm using provolone. You could use cheddar, whatever you like. This is grated Gruyere and Romano. Parmesan is more traditional, but I like Romano, and more importantly, I had Romano. As long as you're using real cheese, don't get anything that's already grated. The amount of cheese that you need to cover this fully depends on the size and shape of your bowls. You just want to make sure you get plenty on. And when I get this covered with cheese, I'm going to put it in the oven under the broiler until everything is brown and bubbly. Be sure you use oven-safe bowls, and as I say, we really should have something for sturdiness, for steadiness under these bowls, but I'll be careful. So here you have it, French Vidalia onion soup. And I want you to look at that texture. It's thick and rich, and the color is beautiful, the smell is amazing, and oh my, there is just nothing that tastes like this. Whichever onions you choose to use, they don't have to be Vidalias. I'm from Georgia. I'm kind of snobby about Vidalias. I really hope you try this. This is just an amazing tasting soup, and it can be an entree. When I have this is all I need. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. Hope to see you again tomorrow.